Today we're gonna talk about A Game of Thrones by George R. Martin. A couple of years ago, I watched the show, and I deliberated whether or not I should buy the books because they're not complete and they probably won't be complete. But I gave it a go, and the first book is pretty much the first season with a few changes here and there. What I find so amazing is that George made this book a little bit too good. What I mean by that is each chapter does what it's meant to do, and there is no extra anywhere. It's basically this book is basically the script for season 1, and I'm just amazed that he could pull it off. There is no miscellaneous going on here. There is no fluff anywhere. It's amazing how he could just make. I mean, they basically adapted this book with minute changes. That's something amazing for a writer to do. The book is a miracle. It's just basically does not have a lot of flaws. What I would like to say is I was astounded that Jaime and Cersei, they really don't stand out in this book at all. And that's probably because the actors in the show, they just did an amazing job. Each character just stands out on their own. In the book, however, Cersei and Jaime, they barely kind of, uh, they're barely above average. What I'm trying to say is they don't pop off at all. Cersei kind of breaks out of the mold at the end when she is confronted by Ned Stark, but they don't really stand out as antagonists or as characters in this first book. Okay, here is a problem. You could argue that they live in a in a backward society. They don't really know anything about genetics, whatever. But you can't tell me that nobody in this world figured out that Robert Baratheon's children aren't his. They're basically Jaime's and Cersei's, right? So Joffrey isn't the real heir to the Iron Throne. But even in this medieval feudal society, there should be people that figured it out. They meet Robert's children and they say, "Listen, bro, these are not your kids, obviously." Probably the small council knows. We find out that John Arryn knows, and that got him killed. But I think this is a flaw in the story that nobody outside these people figured out that the bloodline that produces people with black hair suddenly produced people with blonde hair. Uh, it astounds me that nobody. I mean, this is one of the big secrets or mysteries of this book is Ned Stark trying to find out what killed his boy John Arryn, what he was searching for, and what he found out is that obviously Joffrey and all the other children are not the king's children. And again, this from a narrative standpoint doesn't make any sense because we see that people are very much engaged and interested in who marries who, what children they produce, how they look. They might not know genetics per se, but they understand that this is how it works. If your father has dark hair and a certain jawline, his children will most likely have the same features. But all of the king's children are blondes. They obviously look like Lannisters, and nobody uh, figures this out, or nobody really cares. Okay, and this is a flaw in the narrative. I want to talk about Ned Stark. Let's talk about Eddie. Uh, like I said, I watched the show a couple of years ago, and then before buying the books, I watched videos like Order of the Green Hand and Quinn's Ideas and Secrets of the Citadel. Uh, People have been, reading these books for a while, and one thing that the fans were, I should say, a faction of the fans, they say that probably Ned Stark was kind of written in a way to be dumb in this book. And initially I thought the same. But I thought about it more. You see, this is the problem with Ned Stark. Ned Stark isn't dumb, but he has a problem, which not a lot of people will address. Now, here is why he fails miserably. Now, from what I can tell, this guy is completely exhausted. I mean, his resources, internal resources, they seem to be depleted to me. Uh, I wouldn't call him necessarily a cynic or a pessimist, but he just seems, in a way, indifferent. He's not passive. He's not passive. He does what needs to be done. But what I really get from the guy, good old Eddie, it seems to me that he's done. For the most part, it seems to me that he is done. From the moment he comes at King's Landing and becomes the Hand of the King, his POV chapters, they reveal a great deal about his character, right? It seems to me that he is burnt out, that he is just barely hanging on. I don't really get a sense that he enjoys life in general, right? And I really haven't seen any videos that tackle this subject. It seems to me that Eddie Stark is burnt out, exhausted. He just doesn't want to deal with all of this bullshit, and you can't blame him for it. But unfortunately, because he makes the decisions that he makes, his family suffers greatly, right? Apparently, Eddie is a general. He has the mind of a strategist. He is a great battle commander, and that might be true. But he just does not have the, what would you call it, the tendency, or the, he doesn't have the proclivity for all of these for all of these court machinations, right? It's obvious to me that Eddie, he just doesn't want to play the Game of Thrones. He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to talk to people. He doesn't want to engage with people. He wants to be alone. He wants to be left alone. He wants to go back to Winterfell and polish his sword or whatever. So Ned Stark is not made for the court. It's obvious that a lot of people confuse this reluctance with him being stupid. He is not stupid, clearly. But um, I was really amazed when I realized that Ed Stark, he is done. He is done. He doesn't want anything to do with this. The only reason, the only reason he became Hand of the King is because honor, duty. It was his best friend Robert, and if he refused, then like Catelyn said, there would have been consequences in the future because of his refusal. So Ned Stark, Eddie, uh, what I think really happened with him is because of the thing with Lyanna and his father and his brother and all of that Robert's rebellion. I think that um, something happened to him where he just said, fuck all of this. He was just tired of it all. I mean, how old was he? He was like 20 years old. Um, we find out that he had a love interest with Ashara Dane. We find out that she committed suicide. His father and older brother were killed by the Mad King, and therefore he was forced to marry uh, Catelyn Tully, which turned out to be a bad choice. Let's just say that, right? And to add the cherry on top, his sister Lyanna apparently got kidnapped by Rhaegar Targaryen, and a lot of tomfoolery happened. Now, of course, Tower of Joy thing, the whole Tower of Joy thing is it is strange what happened there, and I'll get to that in a minute. But what I want to say is because all of these things and all of these tragedies happened to Eddie so soon in his life, one after the other, and then to add the cherry on top, his sister dies. He has to keep all of these secrets, and then he has to marry Catelyn Tully, and his life is just destroyed. It's a tragedy after a tragedy, and this is why I think he is so reluctant, or you know, uh, he begrudgingly plays the Game of Thrones, but he is not willing. He seems to be a really deep down, if you really study his POV chapters, he doesn't give a fuck about power. He doesn't give a shit about making friends and making connections in King's Landing. He doesn't give a shit about the small council. He doesn't care that he is the Hand of the King. He doesn't care that he has all of this influence and clout. It seems to me deep down that he is a bitter, burnout person. He is extremely tired, and he doesn't want anything to do with any of this. He just wants to go back to Winterfell and be left alone, right? But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me a lot of people call Ned Stark dumb. He doesn't seem dumb to me. It seems to me that he is extremely reluctant to participate in all of this because he is done. He is done. He has been done for a long time. The thing with Lyanna and then marrying Catelyn, they were the cherry on top, and he just said, fuck this, my life is a joke, right? And keeping all of these secrets for so many years, I think it just ate at him. It eroded whatever joy he had left, and now he is just this. I wouldn't say beaten, but he is just devastated in a way. He does. I mean, you could give him a pile of gold, and I think he wouldn't care at all because Ned Stark is done for. He doesn't care, right? Because he almost lost everything, right? Now, with this Tower of Joy, you know, for a couple of years, like I said, I've watched a lot of these theory videos. Apparently, there's a lot of tomfoolery going on with this uh, Tower of Joy situation. Uh, the way Eddie remembers what happened with Arthur Dane, and all of the others, the way he presents it to us, the readers, is very telling. Now, some of these theory videos say that it did not happen the way Ned remembers it. And the explanation they present is, well, like Ned said, the years, time they eat at one's memory, right? But I think that is a deception. There is there is no way that Ned would misremember what really happened at the Tower of Joy because it was such an important event in his life. I think he would remember every detail of that affair, but yet he remembers it in such a way that it's just suspicious to me. And here's my theory. I have no evidence for this, no evidence at all, but I'm going to tell you my theory, and I've never seen anybody else say it this way. I think that Eddie remembers the Tower of Joy the way he does because either somebody put a spell on him, right? Now listen here. Somebody had to put a spell on him, or somebody warged, took over his mind, and just scrambled everything. These are the only explanations that I will accept. There is no way that Eddie would misremember or would forget important details of the Tower of Joy event if not for these explanations. So he had to have put he had a spell put on him, or somebody warged and scrambled his mind, and that's it. This is the first book. I'm sure there will be other clues, but these are my theories, right? And like I said, I have no evidence to support this theory, but it seems logical to me that this is what really happened because we are inside the mind of Eddie, and yet he doesn't tell us everything. Why would that be, right? Because we are inside his mind, there should be clarity, and yet he remembers that affair in a way that makes us all very suspicious. Now, why would he do that if we are in his mind? There should be no uh, there should be no deceptions when it comes to his mind, because he is in his mind. There should be complete clarity, but he remembers it in a way. I mean, every line of that POV chapter, or every line when it comes to how he remembers the Tower of Joy, it's just suspicious. It's suspicious, it's confusing, it doesn't make any sense. I've watched a lot of theory videos, and they all make sense, but to me, it has to be that somebody put a spell on him or somebody scrambled with his mind. There is no other explanation, right? Why would he hide details of that event when we are inside his mind when he remembers it? It just doesn't make any sense, right? Okay, moving on. Robert Baratheon. Okay, let's talk about Bobby B for a second. Um, Robert Baratheon, okay, he belongs to the streets and he is a simp, okay? Again, I have to say this. I've watched a lot of videos about the Song of Ice and Fire, you know, and some of them, they say correctly, he is a tragic figure. He is a broken man, right? He lost everything when Lyanna Stark died, and I agree with that. He just wasn't the same after Lyanna died. He basically lost any joy for life when his Lyanna died. But let me tell you this, just because all of that happened, that does not excuse his actions in this book. Okay? Um, I agree that he is a tragic figure, a broken man, yada yada, but that does not excuse what he does in this book. Okay? He is a bad king, he is a bad husband, he is a bad father, he is a bad friend, and the list just keeps on going. And his tragic past does not excuse his actions in the present, because his actions in the present, they hurt a lot of people. Okay? Uh, because he picks Ned Stark as the hand of the king, that destroys both of them, right? The stag and the dire wolf, they die. I mean, it's so brilliantly woven into the story. They discover the dire wolf pups. The mother wolf has been killed by the antlers of a stag, which is symbolic. And later in the story, they both die one after the other because this man had to put Ned on the spot to be the hand of the king, because he was so lazy. He knew that Ned could not refuse, and he knew that Ned would do his job because he is dutiful, he is serious, uh, he is honorable, and he could not refuse. So, in a way, Robert, he blackmailed, in a way, or manipulated Ned intentionally, because he knew that Ned could not refuse, right? The time he is as a king, the kingdom, the realm, it's almost bankrupt. The small council, Baelish, Varys, and the rest, they do whatever they want. They steal all the money, yada yada. He and Cersei, their marriage is a shit show. He produces, or I should say, he fails to notice that Joffrey is not his. He knows that Joffrey he knows that Joffrey is fucked up, batshit crazy, and he does absolutely nothing. He knows that Joffrey will be his heir someday. He knows that Joffrey will be king someday, and that he is fucked up, and he does nothing to change this because he doesn't care. He wants to drink wine and whore around, right? And most important, he is a bad friend to Ned Stark. He he constantly puts Ned on the spot, which is not what a true friend does, right? Because of him, Ned Stark dies. It's simple as that. And the most important aspect, okay, the most important aspect. Now listen, there aren't enough details to prove what I'm gonna say. But from this book alone, I can tell you certainly that Robert Baratheon was a simp. He was a simp, and that he belongs to the streets for all of his terrible mistakes, right? Because of his indifference to everything, because he was this victim, tragic figure, because he lost his love, he destroyed the kingdom. He let the small council do whatever they want. He killed Ned Stark. The thing with Lyanna is, and yet I really can't prove this, but this is my gut instinct telling me the truth. Robert Baratheon, when he was younger, he just fell in love with Lyanna Stark. He was just enamored by her. He was just, I mean, he lived for her. And they were to be married, and of course, all of the tragedies happened. She got kidnapped, yada yada. Um, we don't really get any information about Lyanna. Okay, somebody should have said something like Ned should have said how Lyanna felt about Robert, because Ned and Robert were friends. They were always hanging out, and certainly they certainly were at Winterfell, and Lyanna was there. So Ned should have told us how Lyanna felt and reacted to Robert's infatuation, but we don't get that. All we get is that Lyanna knew that Robert was a a whoremonger, basically. That's all we get. And to me, this is telling. The fact that we have absolutely no information on how Lyanna felt about Robert is very telling to me. It tells me that Lyanna Stark really did not care about Robert. This is just my gut instinct telling me this. The fact that he was so infatuated with her, I mean, he basically worshipped her. And we don't get a single sentence about how she felt about him. We don't get her side of the story, which tells me that she was completely indifferent to his uh, 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 romantic infatuation. If this is revealed to be true, imagine the hilarious irony here that this guy was just so fucking uh, involved and passionate about this girl, and she couldn't care less, and she eloped with this Rhaegar Targaryen, and this war started, and she couldn't care less about his love, and he has kept this poisonous dagger in his heart ever since, and Robert has degenerated to this bitter, always drunk fool, right? Because his love was taken from him. But his love, Lyanna probably did not care one way or the other about Robert Baratheon, and that probably is the truth. Uh, Lyanna Stark probably couldn't give less of a fuck about Robert's infatuation. Uh, that's how it seems to me. And that is why, unfortunately, I have to say that Robert Baratheon is a simp. He is a simp, okay? And he belongs to the streets. That's basically how it is. That's basically how it is. He talks like she was a goddess. Everybody talks like Lyanna Stark was this great beauty, and so on and so forth, and all the tragic things that happened. And oh boy, Robert, his love was taken from him. But we don't get a single line about her side of the story. Not one. Why would that be? Because she probably felt, Lyanna felt probably that he was a bit coming on too strong, and the fact that they were promised to each other to marry probably rubbed her the wrong way. She probably didn't have any romantic feelings whatsoever for this guy. But this guy, like any simp, he just couldn't see past his infatuation. He probably overestimated her beauty, her qualities. Like any simp, he put her on a pedestal, and when she was taken away, in quotations, he was completely devastated, and his life after that turned into a mess, a train wreck, right? And another thing, it seems to me that especially Robert, he did not know the real Lyanna at all. He probably did not care what she had to say. He probably did not care about her personality or her opinions. It seems to me that he was just, it was love at first sight for whatever reason, and he did not know who she was. It seems to me that if they talked, he did not listen. That's how infatuated he was. Uh, and he probably did not get the signals that Lyanna probably gave him that she was not really interested in him. That's how much of a simp Robert Baratheon was. Okay, there are talks that he was just this big, strong, handsome dude in the past. He had a great warhammer. He was a great warrior. Oh boy, he just loved life. And then Lyanna was taken from him, and he just became this tragic hero. Oh boy, right? And in a sense, that is true, but it's just so meek, right? It's just so meek when you finally understand that he was such a simp, he was so infatuated that he probably could not read the signals that Lyanna sent him that she was not really interested in him at all, right? So nobody really knew the real Lyanna, especially Robert Baratheon. His entire life was destroyed because of this girl that he did not know. Probably I'm sure that he did not know the real Lyanna. He was just such a simp that he could not understand that she was not interested, right? And he spent the rest of his miserable life just drinking and making bastards. And he died in a pathetic way, right? And another thing, to demonstrate how bad of a person Robert was. Okay, so I said he was a bad king, a bad husband, a bad father, a bad friend, but he was yet again how unaware and how indifferent. He produced a lot of bastard children, right? All over the place. He knew that Cersei really hated that. Right? And he knew the moment that he died that Cersei would eliminate all of them. He knew this. Okay, he knew what a spiteful bitch Cersei was, and he did not care. Okay, he produced all of these children because they are his bastards. They are sentenced to death by Cersei, and he did not care at all. He just went on and he produced more bastards with indifference, and he just caused a lot of death. Okay, this is the biggest thing. He caused a lot of death. He killed his best friend. He killed all of his bastard children. He almost brought the realm to ruin, etc., etc. Okay, so this is why Robert Baratheon, he was a simp, and he belongs to the streets. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about Tyrion for a little bit. When he first meets Jon, they have their little talk. Tyrion goes back inside, and when he opens the doors, you know, he casts a big shadow, and it is said in the book that he was as tall as kings, right? I like that. I like that. Another thing, when he goes to the Night's Watch, Maester Aemon says that he is a giant that has descended among them. So Master Aemon says that Tyrion is a giant descended among them. First of all, how does Master Aemon know this? Okay, of course, there's all of this speculation that he is a secret Targaryen, Tyrion. But how does Master Aemon come to the realization that, there's more to Tyrion that meets the eye, that he is a, quote, giant that has descended among them? How does he know this? How has he come um, to this realization? That's what I want to know, right? Of course, with Tyrion, it's obvious that he is more than what we are presented. I don't want him to be a secret Targaryen. Not everybody has to be a secret Targaryen. Being a great, amazing person does not always equal being a Targaryen. It does not equate to being a Targaryen. There are a lot of people in this book that are not Targaryens that are amazing. Okay, so Tyrion being a Targaryen really does not interest me at all. In one of Jon's chapters, he is at the Night's Watch, and this bothered me. Uh, he somehow knows that Sansa's direwolf lady has been killed and that her bones were being brought back to Winterfell. And it bothers me because how would he know this information, right? Is King's Landing just sending ravens everywhere, telling everybody, listen, Ned Stark killed his daughter's direwolf because the direwolf attacked Prince Joffrey. Who's sending all of these ravens for? With this, it seems to me unimportant information, right? So in one of these chapters, Jon knows that that Sansa's direwolf attacked Joffrey and Ned had to kill it, and he knows that Arya was missing and then that she was found. How does he know all of this information? Because he is at the Night's Watch. Uh, I don't think that he has been made Mormont's page yet, right? So that kind of bothered me that he would have this information. That it seems trivial to me. Like, who's writing these notes and sending ravens with this information that Joffrey was attacked by a direwolf and that direwolf had to be executed? Ned Stark's execution, poor old Eddie. Eddie's execution in this book is completely different from the show. They are worlds apart. In the show, he is there, we see him, we see the sword, we hear his head come off, we see him say something before his head gets cut off, we see the birds, right? In the book, Ned's execution is very subtle. It almost happens off screen. We don't see it, we kind of hear it, but it does not happen the way it happens in the show. The show did what they did for the shock factor. In the book, we are told that Arya hears a sound and maybe even the birds, but that's about it. We don't see him say that prayer or whatever he said. We don't see that the sword is coming down, etc. So there is a major difference between the execution in the show and the execution in the book. In the book, it is so subtle. It is so, let's just put it like this. In the book, Ned's execution, it is almost like it is happening in the background, basically. which astonished me. The way it happens in the books, it is so covert. It is so in the background that it has no impact. Okay, in the book, Ned's execution is not shocking. It has no impact. It happens in the background. It is not an impactful moment in the book at all. To me, anyway, right? Because it's so like it happens almost in the shadows. We see it from Arya's perspective, but even Arya cannot really see what's really happening. The best line in this book, okay? The best line in this book, and this scene in the show was just as potent, okay? So they're talking about killing Daenerys in the small council, and Ned has had enough, and he says something that just fucking destroys everybody. Okay, he tells Robert, I didn't know you for a man that trembled at the shadow of an unborn child. And I was like, yeah, get him, Eddie, get him. Ned Stark is a savage when he wants to be, okay? Ned Stark is not dumb. I mean, he is brilliant in some ways, but he is a savage. Okay, when he said that, I'm just like, yeah. I did not know you for a man that trembled at the shadow of an unborn child, right? Uh, and this really hits hard. It really affects Robert. Uh, and you can really see the difference between these two characters in this moment. Because, like I said, Ned and Robert, they're very bitter, uh, devastated people. But Ned still has his morals. Ned still understands the difference between right and wrong, between honor and cowardice. And Robert, because he is in the position of king, he has to give the order to murder a little girl and her unborn child. And of course, there is no honor in that at all. So you can really see the dichotomy of these two characters. Let's end this video with this. Okay, let's end it with this. I was not expecting this. But even in the first book, my guy, even in the first book, I mean, Joffrey is a cunt. Okay, Joffrey is a fucking cunt. And of course, he will get worse in the following books. But, I mean, he is the biggest cunt in Cuntville, period. I mean, every time he just shows up, I'm like, get out of here, Joffrey. I don't care, Joffrey. Stop talking to me, Joffrey. Get out of here, Joffrey. Right? I mean, he is just the worst. And let me tell you, uh, Joffrey is the product of Cersei. Okay? Joffrey is the perfect example of what can happen to a child when the mother or the parent is the way that Cersei is. Okay? And she is oblivious to the fact that Joffrey is fucked up in the head because of her personality, because of the way she acts, because of her essence as a person is why Joffrey is the way that he is. And they all know in the small council, everybody knows that Joffrey is fucking cuckoo. And they do nothing about it. Joffrey ruined his whole career the moment he executed Eddie Stark. Okay, so that was the moment when Joffrey ruined his whole career. Okay, And what I love about Ned's execution, right? The moment Joffrey says the words, "Sir Ilan Payne, bring me his head," as well as in the show and in the book, everybody loses their mind. Okay, both in the book and in the show, Varys, Pycelle, even Cersei, when they hear that Ned is gonna be executed, they lose their shit. They're fidgeting. They are begging Joffrey, "Listen, dude, this is a mistake. This is the biggest mistake ever done." Okay, in the show especially, I mean, Varys is like, "Yo, do you understand what you're doing here, my guy?" I mean, even Pycelle, with his little fucking hands, he's like, "Listen, Joffrey, you gotta stop, bro. This is a big mistake." And even I love it. Even Cersei is like, "Yo, I know I'm a psychopath, but even I know that killing Ned Stark is trouble. It's bad. Okay, stop." And Joffrey is such a fucking cunt that he does not get it. He does not understand, but that by giving this order, he ruined his whole career. Okay, and that is probably my favorite scene from this book. Okay, the fact that all of these horrible people, because they are horrible people, Cersei, uh, Varys, Pycelle, etc. They are fucking terrible people. But they have made an arrangement with Ned. Confess, and we will send you to the Night's Watch, and your family will be safe. That was the arrangement. And Joffrey had to fuck it all up. Joffrey had to ruin everything, along with his career. And when that moment happened, I mean, I was fucking laughing because everybody was just terrified. They were in a state of panic. They were like, "Bro, everybody knew you just don't execute Ned Stark without expecting some serious consequences in the future. Executing Ned Stark has to be the biggest mistake in the history of big mistakes, right?" Everybody knew this, all right? And everybody, they were shitting their pants. Cersei, Varys, Pycelle, they were like, "Bro, you need to cancel this execution, my guy," right? But Joffrey, being the soy boy that he is, he did not understand. He did not hear everybody. And with that moment alone, with that decision, he just ruined his whole career before it even started. And another thing, and I'll stop this video. When Joffrey gave the order for Ned to be executed, the only one, both in the show and in the book, that does nothing is, of course, Littlefinger. Peter Baelish, I mean, especially in the show, if you watch that scene, you can see that he is just standing there while everybody else is in a panic, and he has a little smirk. Okay, he has a little smirk on his face. He is the only one that is pleased with Ned Stark's execution. Okay, no matter what his reasons are, Littlefinger is a little bitch, okay? Just like Joffrey. That's just how it is. He is petty because he has this history with Caitlyn and his older brother Brandon, etc. Whatever. So the only one that loved Ned's execution was Littlefinger, okay? Which makes me uh, think about this particular mystery. Okay, the thing with the dagger that was meant to kill Bran. Okay, from what we understand, the dagger was Littlefinger's, but he lost it to Tyrion on a bet, right? So, in the first book, a lot of people believe that Tyrion paid that assassin to kill Bran, and he was stupid enough to give him that Valyrian, very expensive dagger, right? Which is absurd, right? Uh, there's not a lot of evidence to support who the real uh, benefactor of this assassination is. Now, obviously, the first suspect is, of course, Jaime and Cersei, because they really have a reason to get rid of this kid. Uh, a theory that I heard is that it had to be Joffrey because he's just such a psycho, that he believed, and there's this idea that it's better to kill cripples than let them live because they will suffer. Okay, so I mean, there's no real evidence to know who really paid the assassin and who really gave him that dagger. It could have been Jaime and Cersei. It could have been Littlefinger. It could have been Joffrey. But here's what I would like to suggest. It could have also been Robert Baratheon himself. That's right. Because listen, um, Robert made the offer to Ned to be the Hand of the King, and Bran fell. Okay, he was pushed by Jaime. Everybody else thinks that he just fell. And now Ned cannot really leave because his son is in a coma. So this could be a possibility. Uh, Robert Baratheon, because he is so, he has no honor left, basically. And because he wants to bring Ned as his hand, he might have paid someone to pay the assassin to kill Bran so that Ned could finally leave.